Welcome everyone to lesson 6.3, Finding Percents, the video. Please remember that for each of these at-home assignments you need to write down the standard. I have enlarged it here. You can pause the video as you continue copying it down. This lesson will address two main ways to solve a percent problem. The first is setting up a proportion. The proportion method always uses this basic setup. Percent over 100 equals part over the whole. The trick is, when using the proportion method, knowing what numbers go where. I'll start a flow map on the right side of the screen. The first step is to set up the proportion using the numbers in the problem. The word of always indicates the whole in the question. In this question, 144 comes right after the word of, therefore it is the whole in our second ratio or fraction. Because the problem asks what percent of 144 is 64, the percent is unknown, and we can represent it using a variable such as n or 100. And finally, 64 is the part, often indicated by the word is, but not always, so don't depend on that. To make proportions easier to solve, remember that you can simplify one of the ratios if it can be reduced by dividing the top and bottom by the same number. In this case, we can divide 64 and 144 by 16 and reduce that ratio or fraction to 4/9. Now cross multiply and you get the equation 400 equals 9n. Then solve the equation by dividing both sides by 9, as you should already know how to do. Now in this case, we need to do some long division, and just to make sure you do yours correctly and you can identify your errors, I'll do it here for you. Obviously the 4 is going to repeat, so draw a bar over it, not over the 4's before the decimal, but the 4 after the decimal is what repeats. Then finally, since the question asks what percent of 144 is 64, be sure to write your answer as a percent, not just leaving the solution n equals 44.4. But it is 44.4 repeating percent, and you can always leave decimals and repeating decimals in your answers when written as percents. When you use the proportion method, you never have to convert from decimals or fraction forms of the number to percent or back. You just have to add the percent sign at the end of your answer. This time we'll do the same question using the equation method. The equation method is always the percent times the whole equals the part, or it's usually easy enough to translate the sentence directly into an equation. The sentence begins with what percent, so our percentage is the unknown in this equation, so we'll use a variable to represent it. Then the word of means multiply, so we'll have to multiply times the whole, which comes next, because always indicated by the word of. Then the word is means equals, so now we're creating an equation. And then finally, equals what? Equals 64. And let's go back and use a variable to represent the percent. The next step is to simplify any part of the equation that needs to be. In this case, we need to multiply 144 times n, or just rewrite it as 144n, equals 64. Next, solve your equation to find the value of n. Divide both sides by 144. And there's a little bit of long division involved here. I'll show you what it should look like so you can identify any mistakes you might make. I can see that I'm just going to keep getting 4's, so the solution for n is 0.4 repeating. But I need to convert that into a percent. Keep in mind that 0.4 repeating means 0.44444 on and on forever. When you convert a decimal expression into a percentage, you move the decimal to the right 2 places. Which puts it here, making it 44.4%, and you can indicate that the 4 does repeat. It's just like the answer we got in the first version of the example. It's important to keep in mind that when you use the equation, you will always need to convert your percentage into a fraction or a decimal in order to simplify the equation and solve it, or when you get to the end, your answer needs to be converted from decimal or fraction form. In example 2, we have a couple of word problems that require us to convert fractions and decimals into their percentage form so that we can add them together and then find out what's left out of the total of 100%. So let's convert these each into percentages, those that are not. Mary's 1/4 becomes 25%. That's one that you should probably memorize before we're done with this unit. 0.28 easily becomes 28% by moving the decimal over twice. And 30% is already a percentage. Add the 3 of them up for a total of 83%. Then we'll set up a little equation that says Laura's percentage of the work, and we'll use the letter L to represent her percentage. Laura's percentage is equal to 100% minus all of the work that the other 3 did. Simplify the left side of the equation. 100 minus 83 is 17, and 17% equals L. There's no more work to do to solve the equation. We already know the solution is 17, or 17%, but it's a word problem, so answer in words. The second word problem in example 2 is basically the same type of problem. We need to convert all of these quantities into the same form. So converting 3/8 into a percentage involves dividing 3 by 8. Which is 0.375, and then rewriting that as a percentage, which is 37.5. The carats are 0.25. That easily converts into 25%. And the other two quantities are already in percentages. So we can set up our equation. Where G equals the percentage of the garden, which is green beans. And that percentage plus all of the other percentages add together to equal 100%, the entire garden, the whole thing. Next we have some simplifying to do. All of the other parts of the garden equal 90% of it. Then solve the equation by subtracting the 90% from both sides, and we find that G equals 10%. And again, it's a word problem, so answer in words. The green beans take up 10% of the garden. In the third example, we're finding the percent of a number, so we're given the percentage and asked to find the part of the whole in the form of a word problem. So we'll set up an equation by rewriting this sentence: what speed is 33 1/3% of 32 miles per hour, as an equation. What speed, that is our unknown, is means equals 33 1/3% of, meaning multiply, 32. Now, just like when we solved for the percentage using the equation method, when you solve for a number or the whole, you need to convert your percentage. You can't multiply percentages times other things. You need to use the fraction or decimal form. 33 1/3% is another one that you should memorize to be equivalent to 1/3 in fraction form, because multiplying times 0.3 repeating is never completely accurate, but multiplying times 1/3 is always exact. And now we can simplify 1/3 times 32 and put 32 over 1. We get 32 over 3. And since we're answering a word problem, and if you asked me how fast the pig runs and I told you 32/3 of a mile per hour, you'd look at me quite strangely. So let's find out a little more accurately how fast that is. And it turns out it is 10.6 repeating miles per hour. And again, it's a word problem. Answer in words. And finally, the second problem in example 3, another word problem, tells you that Mount McKinley is 130% of the height of Mount Churchill. So to set it up so you can make it into an equation or proportion, you want to put it in terms of that very simple sentence that says this is some percent of that or whatever. So you're trying to figure out what is 130% of 15,638. And there's a helpful hint there up in the right corner of your screen which says that if you're trying to find more than 100% of a number, your answer is going to be bigger than the number you started with. Just keep that in mind to make sure that you do the math right. For this problem, I'm setting up a proportion. 130 is the percent, which always goes over 100. And the word of in our simplified sentence indicates that the number directly after it, 15,638, is the whole. And the x is the part. And you'll see how it's not necessarily true that the part is smaller than the whole. But we know what the whole is because of the word of. Next, it will be helpful to simplify the fraction, reducing it to 13 over 10 instead of 130 over 100. Then cross multiply. And you might need to do this to figure out what 15,638 times 13 is, so check my work against yours. So that is 203294. And then to solve the equation from the cross products, divide both sides by 10 to find out what x equals. And dividing by 10, if you remember from class this morning, is as simple as moving the decimal one place to the left. So it goes there between the 9 and the 4, and our answer is 20,329.4 feet. Take a moment and answer the think and discuss questions, and in case you're confused about what they are asking, look below. Now, if you're as sick of listening to me talk as I am of hearing myself talk, I'm just going to drop out here and continue working through these problems. Remember, in the top left corner it tells you which example to refer to, and I have copied over the flow maps from those examples that I am using to complete these problems. You can pause the video, try it on your own and see what answer you get, then see if I get the same thing in the video, or you can let it run and write it down step by step as I do it if you don't understand it quite as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.